Hello. We're going to wait about one more minute. Make sure everybody gets into the room, okay?
Sounds good.
We got a few people coming in here.
Yahoo!
I was thinking there might be a couple more, but we'll wait. Thank you all for joining us today in this windy weather. Okay, well, it's about 4:01 and I don't want to keep people hanging too long. Here's one more. Okay. I'll wait till 2 after and then we will get started.
While we're waiting, and for those who are waiting here with us, Jessica did send out some documents earlier today that are going to have a worksheet that we'll all be working off of, and then also some things that were labeled booth sheets. If you want to take just a moment from your email to pull those up, those will be necessary for tonight.
Thank you, Bree. Okay, I think we're going to go ahead and get started. Folks, you are seeing a new module tonight called Making the Golden Years Golden. This will be presented by Ent Credit Union, and I will tell you a little bit more about them in very shortly. We are glad you could be with us today, sharing your afternoon, and we are going to dive into our second session of the Spring Retirement Series, which is the Making the Golden Years Golden. And by the way, this is our 8th annual Pikes Peak Area Agency on Aging and Ent Credit Union Retirement Series, and we are thrilled to be able to present that to you. My name is Pamela, and I do represent the Area Agency on Aging, and the staff person behind the scenes is Jesse Duncan, who is in charge of our web and IT coordinator to make sure that everything runs smoothly for you today. Most of you probably already know about the Area Agency on Aging, but basically we specialize in providing senior information, resources, assistance, public education for adults age 60 and over. And we're proud to say that we house the local state health insurance program, fondly known as SHIP, S-H-I-P. And the SHIP program provides objective Medicare and health information, health insurance information. There will be handouts, which Bree mentioned. You should have received those. Those were sent out to you earlier today. Make sure you have those ready for tonight. And then in addition, if you have signed up for our series, you will see that there are other handouts with different modules that are available for you to use and to download into your system. Just for reference, so you all know that this was a collaboration with the Colorado Bar Association, the Colorado Area Agencies on Aging, and the SHIP programs throughout the state of Colorado that help provide us these resources. Now, we would appreciate on microphones, keep yourself muted. If you have questions, I'll leave that up to the team to decide if they want to take questions as we go or at the end, however you guys want to do that. And I'm going to introduce the Ent representative for this evening, who's going to talk to you about Ent and about the door prize that we have for the surveys that we will be doing, that you will be given. Probably they'll be sent out tomorrow. So it's this time I'd like to introduce Michael Rozuki, Curriculum Development Administrator for Ent, who will say a few words about Ent Credit Union and their partnership with the AAA. I apologize, Michael, for not getting your name correctly.
You're good. No worries, Pamela. Thank you. So we're so happy to work with you. And just to give you a little bit of a rundown about Ent, and as Pamela mentioned, the door prize is pretty good. So it's $50 Amazon gift card. So as Pamela mentioned, there will be a survey. Fill that out, and you get entered and a chance to win. And odds are pretty good. So definitely take the time to fill that out. We appreciate the feedback. So just a little bit about Ent. We were founded in 1957. So that makes us 65 years old this year. So pretty impressive. Ent is the largest credit union in Colorado. For the fourth consecutive year, we were ranked #1 by Forbes as far as Colorado's #1 credit union. We are a not-for-profit financial community chartered credit union. So basically, our mission statement is committed to improving our members' financial quality of life. We do that through better rates, lower fees, and great products and services. Just a little bit about our assets. We are $8.5+ billion in assets, so quite a chunk there. And we have over 430,000 members. We have more than 45 service centers across the Front Range, and Ent is an equal housing opportunity and equal opportunity lender insured by the NCUA. So to find out more about us, visit ent.com.
Okay, thank you, Mike. Appreciate it. What I'd like to do now is introduce the Ents Community Education Team. They are a team of 7 individuals who will be putting on this module this evening, Making the Golden Years Golden. As you all know, which Mike has mentioned, the team puts Ents' mission statement of improving financial lives into action. And in addition to partnering with schools, businesses, and organizations like ours, they create educational materials and courses for all to further their financial literacy. So please join me, join us, join everybody in welcoming Ents' dynamic team presenting the Golden Years Golden. Okay, group, take it away.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Pamela. And thank you to everybody for joining us this afternoon. We have a super fun class planned. With that, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And we can get started. So my name is Katie. So I will be kicking things off for us today. And I am here with my absolutely amazing coworkers that are going to be helping with teaching the class tonight. So like I said, a super fun class this afternoon, and we may have some folks in class today that are already in retirement, or perhaps retirement might be right around the corner, or we may have some folks this afternoon who might think that retirement is kind of a little ways away and still have some time to prepare for that. But whichever stage that you are in today, you're still hopefully going to leave today's class with some tools that you can take with you to help you with both planning for and living through those golden years. So when we think about what our retirement years look like, everyone's vision is going to be a little bit different. And, it's important that we take that time to think about what that picture looks like. And so everyone's going to look a little bit different. And what is it for you? Do you think that you might want to stick around where you've already been living, or perhaps you might want to take this as an opportunity to move somewhere else? Maybe you want to get some traveling in that you didn't get to do before, maybe pursue some new hobbies, or maybe you want to be close to your family, or maybe move a little further away from your family. What is that going to look like for you? Again, it's going to be different for all of us. But it's important, again, that we take that time to think about what this picture looks like. What do we want these years to be? Because if we don't take that first step in thinking about it, then how do we know how much money we should be saving and setting aside? But if you haven't taken the time to consider these things, you are not alone. And in fact, a lot of us haven't really taken that time to envision what we want our retirement years to look like. You know, things get busy, life gets busy, things happen. We have a million things to do on our list, and sometimes this gets put on the back burner. But once we take the time to consider what these years are going to look like for us, or what we want them to look like now, if we're already at that point in our life, then we can know how much money to be saving, to set aside. We can know what our budget is going to look like also. And so that is where today's class comes in. So we have an exercise that we are going to walk through to help you start thinking about some of this stuff. So we have 7 different categories that cover all of the major areas that we spend our money in our retirement years. And this is where my team is going to jump in. They're going to go through each of these categories and spend about 3 to 4 minutes on each topic. And we encourage you to join in on the conversation along the way. Feel free to unmute, throw in the chat, whatever you would like to add in your ideas and your thoughts on the matter. So as Bree mentioned, in your email, there was a worksheet. So this is the worksheet that you'll be looking for. Go ahead and pull that up if you haven't already. You'll be filling this out over the next little bit here as we go through each category. And this is an editable PDF, so you don't have to worry about printing it. You can just key in your numbers right there on your computer as we go through. So you'll see those 7 categories, and there is an other category at the bottom. That is going to be the catch-all. So that's everything else that perhaps those other categories don't cover. As my teammates go through each section, they will give you that national average. As you can see, it's already filled in for the other category. And for your calculation, you can go ahead and put that 5% in the other category as well. As they go through each section, they'll give you that national average and then walk through some different ideas and things to consider to help you figure out what your number is. And then you'll plug that into your calculation. As we go, don't worry about any totals right now. We're going to go through the calculation at the end of all this. So don't worry about that. Your numbers shouldn't even equal 100%. So that shouldn't be a concern. We'll get to that in just a little bit here. But you know, with this exercise, this is going to give us an idea of how much of our pre-retirement earnings we should be trying to replace in our retirement years. All right, so I am going to hand it over to Michael, who is starting off the first section for us.
Thank you, Katie. Appreciate it. All right, so we're starting with the first category, which is food and clothing, which happens to be my favorite, specifically the food. So go ahead and, as Katie said, take out your worksheet and jot in the average. So if we look in this middle category here, our average for food and clothes for an individual or a couple is 18%. So you could either key that in, or if you printed it out, write that, but go ahead and just jot down 18% for the national average. And let's just go through this. So when we're considering food and clothing, it's kind of grouped together. So we'll take this by 2 different subcategories. Let's just talk about food first. So the range really is anywhere from 12% on the lower end. So if you don't spend too much on food and clothing, up to about 25 if you are above average. So what would you consider above average? What's below average? So there's a few things to factor in when we're talking specifically about food. One is, do you eat out frequently? So think about yourself and your situation. Do you like to eat out quite a bit throughout the week? Maybe you don't eat out at all, maybe just once in a blue moon. But that will actually factor into how much you spend on food. So that's one thing to consider, is how much you eat out. And one other factor to consider is your tastes in food. So are you somebody who likes to order maybe the more expensive items on the meal or on the menu? Or maybe you tend to go for the cheaper items? And this also applies to dining in as well. So maybe you tend to buy all your food at the grocery store, but you like name brand items, you go for the finer cuts of meat. That plays into it as well. So think about your tastes in food. And can we go? Thank you. So that's one thing to consider. And then the last thing to consider with food is how often you like to entertain. So are you somebody who has a lot of dinner parties? Do you invite a lot of guests over? Think about different holidays. Are you the person who hosts? Because if so, that'll put you on the more above average category. And then, average and below average are kind of the opposite there. Maybe you never host anything, you're not the entertainer there. Maybe you have less expensive tastes in food, that would put you more below average. So that's food in a nutshell. And then we'll talk about clothing, which is also grouped in here too. And it's somewhat similar to food. So think about the frequency in which you buy new clothes. Typically, if you're retired, you tend to buy less clothes because you're not in the workforce there. But if you are somebody who likes to buy new clothes frequently, then that would put you in the above average category. And maybe you only replace clothes as needed, then you would be below average. Another thing to consider, like food, is your taste in clothing. Are you somebody who likes name brand items? Maybe you shop at more expensive stores? Or do you tend to maybe get secondhand clothing? You shop at places like Goodwill where you could find a good bargain. That will also factor into how much you spend on clothing. So just take a minute to think about your specific situation. Again, the ranges are from 12 to about 25%. So you'll take your lifestyle worksheet and go ahead and put in whatever you think. So 12 to 25, it doesn't have to be exactly that. Maybe you think, 20% or 15%. Again, 18% is the average, but just think about your situation and go ahead and fill that out. All right. And with that, I will turn it over to Nate to discuss housing.
Thanks, Michael. So when it comes to housing, as retirement approaches, or you may or may not already be in this season of your life, housing, where you're going to live for the rest of your life, is something pretty important to think about, and really kind of what lifestyle you want to have when it comes to how you want to live and where you want to live. So similar, in all these slides will be similar in showing the national average above and below. So first off, the national average for a retiree or retired couple is 32%. So they're spending about 32% of their expenditures on housing. That can include either a mortgage payment or rent, insurance, taxes, and then just regular maintenance on the house and or furnishings for the house as well. So above average is going to be 40% and below average will be 20%. So we'll just kind of start with above average and work our way down from there. So some things to think about when it comes to housing for above average is, are you in or do you want to be in eventually when you retire either a larger home, high mortgage payments? So when it comes to high mortgage payments, some things to think about, especially with the rising home prices right now, and rising interest rates, as well as do you picture retirement being somewhere where it's a little bit more off the grid, more self-sustaining? That might be something below average, but above average might be, do you want to have a couple of homes? Do you want to have the vacation home where the family can come visit? Do you want a larger home where, again, there's plenty of room so that when family comes over, they can stay over? As for having a couple homes, a lot of retirees like to oftentimes, especially here in Colorado, have a winter home and a summer home. Here in the winter, it gets pretty cold, so that's when they like to go off to Florida or Arizona or one of those places. Is that something that you see yourself in? If so, you might be in the above average. And again, with that, there would be higher maintenance, higher utilities, because you'd have a couple of homes that you're paying for those things for. Thinking about average could be medium-sized home, modest mortgage payments. If you're close to already paying off your home already, or it is already paid off, that might be where you might find yourself in the average section. And then below average would be something along the lines of, maybe you want to downsize the house. You don't need a big house anymore, and you want to maybe look at a modular, or a lot of retirees like to sometimes get RVs, travel the country, maybe take the grandkids on a trip around the US of A. That might be something that you might want to do as well. Again, if you have an RV, there might not be any mortgage payments. Same with modular homes. Oftentimes with modular homes, you're only paying for the spot that the home is on. But if the modular is paid off, then there might not be any mortgage payments. And then the last one, there's living with children. So again, if you decide to maybe move in with your children again, or go see family, live with them, that might be something that's in the below average section as well. The other thing to keep in mind, I'll just add, is along the way, another thing that you can think about when it comes to retiring and getting assistance with housing expenditures, United Way 211 can also help pay for some of those things, help you out if you need that. So that's just something to keep in mind. So like Michael said earlier, this doesn't have to equal 100. So on your sheets, if you haven't already, go to write in 32% for the average, and then where you think you might land. 20% being low, 40% being above average, just depending on what you want to do for your housing come retirement. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and pass it off to Bree. She's going to talk to you about travel or transportation.
Certainly is a form of travel. Thank you so much, Nate. So I'll give you folks just another moment to write down your numbers. It's important that as we're going through that worksheet, your numbers are coming in right with it. So thanks so much for keeping up on that sheet. That'll be worth it in the end. All right, so I love when transportation follows housing, because much of what Nate talked about sometimes also applies here. We've heard from so many folks that when they're looking to retire, it might be plans to travel and retire. Some folks are looking to rent an RV or to own an RV, more so would be the dream here. So transportation is going to come into that, as is getting everywhere else. I want to take just a moment to address a question in the chat. What is required for United Way 211? So United Way is across Colorado. They have one in the Pikes Peak region. They also have one up in the Denver region. They have them across Colorado. So depending where you're joining us from, 211 is the phone number that you can call to seek out help from United Way. And United Way, they provide actually access to resources within your area, depending on what you're needing. Housing can be one of the most difficult ways to actually get assistance. But since Nate's category was housing, what sometimes is easier to get assistance with are things like food and clothing, sometimes even transportation, a lot of the other needs that we're going to talk about. So if you're finding yourself needing to allocate more funds towards housing, because that can be more complicated to get help with, sometimes getting help for the other areas can be a little bit easier than getting help with housing. So sometimes they'll assist with utilities, and what they'll primarily do is just assess your situation and then get you in contact with various resources that'll help, just determining on what you need individually. So definitely a great resource to get in touch with United Way through their 211 program. It's completely free. And then they also are just a great guide on what resources are in your community to help with some of these things. So back to transportation, if you're on your sheet, please do write down that 17% is the average that either a couple or an individual spends based on their pre-retirement income on transportation. What that average looks like there in the middle is you either own one, depending on your size, or two small vehicles with moderate usage. So transportation doesn't just look like vehicles, but in these circumstances, sometimes it's just maintaining and also just all of the maintenance. So certainly maintaining the vehicle, but also the fuel, the insurance. Transportation is all encompassing for how you're getting from point A to point B. Some of the other options that I want to talk about as well, we also have some up and coming public transportation. Those are getting better with each passing year. We also have tremendous things like biking trails, just depending on your abilities, that can also offset some of these. So if you're looking at options like that, you might fall somewhere in the below average area, somewhere around that 10%. So this category typically ranges from 10 to 25%. If ever you're finding yourself that you're going to use less than what some of these suggest or more, you're welcome to put that in your sheet as well. Just going to change things for you. So just really a self-assessment is what this is all about. Where do you think you're going to land? And if you're looking at things like public transportation and some other options, might be in that below average category. What else that looks like is if you have a vehicle that does not require a lot of maintenance, maybe one that doesn't require a lot of fuel, perhaps an electric vehicle, you're really just replacing that when it's needed to be replaced and you're not using it very often. There's also other services like Uber that are getting more affordable. And then also for seniors, there's several options out there that are also assisting in getting to and from doctor's visits, senior centers. So always great to look into some of those other transportation methods. In the above average area here, this is where we're talking about multiple vehicles in the household. They may be expensive to maintain. Maybe you're somebody who prefers to keep a more up-to-date vehicle. Certainly, if you are in a family where you're the main form of transportation for others, often when we talk to folks that are in retirement age or approaching that, they may be helping to take care of some other family members, maybe get some grandkids to and from school or wherever they need to be. So that may be a consideration as well if you're looking in that above average category. As I said, this is the transportation not only for the vehicle cost, it is also to cover the fuel, the maintenance, so just something to be considered. As we talk about some of these other categories, such as travel, this is where some of these are going to intersect, because if you're somebody who's going to travel often, then you'll also want to make sure that if that's going to be by vehicle, then you're allocating proper transportation and fuel costs for those. So as I said, this one ranges from about 10% to 25%, depending on your usage and your idea of what transportation is going to look like during that time. So just give you a moment, make sure you write down 17% as the national average, and then choose a percentage that best fits your circumstance. And then I'm going to pass it over to Emma to talk about health and fitness.
All right, thank you so very much, Bree. So the next category, health and fitness. Typically looking at about a range of 7% to 15% of total expenditures for retirees or couples. At 10% is going to be about the average. So go ahead and write that down there. Health and fitness. So this includes a couple expenses such as insurance, prescriptions, any medical supplies you may need. And just like most things in life, health costs are predicted to increase in the future. It is important to remember with this category, there are certain factors that we have absolutely no control over as individuals, such as the cost of those services I mentioned, the insurance, the different drugs or medical supplies you may need. Another part that we have no control over is any genetics or pre-existing conditions that we have that we can't control. So those can also influence how much we're spending on the category, whether we're looking at illness and different conditions. But it's important to keep in mind, too, that there are certain things that we can be doing now to kind of help limit the cost in the future of what we're spending on by changing up or maintaining a healthier lifestyle. So some of the things we can ask ourselves in this category is, how would you rate your current health and your fitness levels? Are you exercising regularly? Do you have any health issues that you have currently that may carry over into retirement or anything going on at the moment? Any predispositions you have genetic wise, and will you have any sort of employer sponsored insurance, or will you have to be self-insured? So again, kind of looking at that average, that may look like some minor health issues. Maybe you are pretty fit, exercising regularly, and maybe there are some genetic issues. We're looking at below average. Maybe you are a marathon runner right now or bike riding every single Sunday. Looking at above average, again, kind of more of that poor health and pre-existing conditions. Me personally, I know I am above average in this category, just family history, certain things like that. And while it's not too fun to think about, it is a good consideration to keep in mind. Some other things we can ask ourselves is us as an individual, maybe our spouse, were they in the military? Do we have any benefits we could really take advantage of there in retirement? Also, what age are we retiring? When are those benefits from our employer kicking in or stopping? And another thing too, living in Colorado, where do you want to live when you retire? Can there be ways to be active outside? Maybe it is going on hikes or walking trails, or maybe you need a gym membership. So thinking about the climate where you're living, health conditions, and then again, just those factors that we really can't help. So again, 10% is that average we're looking at for health and fitness. You may be below or above that. So we'll give you a few minutes to think about that, a couple seconds. And with that, I'll pass it over to Sarah to talk about our next category.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Emma. I understand that many of these categories can be very stressful to think about because a lot of these situations are outside of our control. And with housing costs on the rise, transportation costs on the rise, and perhaps facing some health issues later in life can be stressful. I want us to bring our attention to this category, which is a little more fun to think about, and there are a lot of options here. So this category is leisure, travel, and entertainment, and it encompasses everything that we may do for fun. The average retiree in this category spends about 8% on leisure, travel, and entertainment, with the range typically falling between 5 and 15% of expenditure. So for this category, you're going to think, what are your hobbies? What are your travel plans? And what are your athletic pursuits? So the first thing I want us to think about is travel. This comes down to where are we going and how often are we traveling? Obviously, if we travel a lot, it's going to be on the higher end of things here. So if you're going on vacations every other week, if you spend the whole year traveling, you might want to allot a lot of money for that. Most of us are going to fall more somewhere in between in this category. We'll travel maybe a few times a year, but not that often. And then some people don't want to travel at all. They're very comfortable at home. They find travel stressful, so they don't have plans to go to many places and won't need to allot that much money for it. This also comes down to where we're going. Traveling overseas or going very far is obviously going to be more of an expense. So if you have plans to go on a lot of cruises, especially all the way around the world, or to fly to Paris to see the Eiffel Tower, you're going to want to bump yourself up a little more in that range toward the 15%. If you plan on traveling interstate, maybe going to Wyoming, seeing Yellowstone, going out to California to see the West Coast, that's going to be more in the middle of this category, more toward that 8% here. And then if you don't plan on going very far, only traveling locally, maybe enjoying the hot springs up in the mountains for a weekend, then you're not going to be spending that much money on traveling because you're not going to be going very far. It would just be a bit of a drive. So think, where do you want to go and how often do you want to go to figure out that travel component of this section. You should also keep in mind that there are many senior discount travel groups that if you are worried about the expense of traveling later in life, or you're worried about doing it alone, you can take advantage of those groups to try to help you out and have somebody fun to go with as well. The next section in this category is the sports. This is both what you plan on playing for your own entertainment, your own athletic pursuits, and the sports you plan on watching. So for those sports you play, hopefully we're still enjoying running around later in life. I would like to be able to do that as well. You want to think, are my sports low cost? So something like hiking or biking, you don't really need to spend a lot of money on doing that. You just go outside, find a place to hike and enjoy that. And that's great. Those are great free athletic activities that we can do. Maybe you're more into a middle cost sport, something that might be a league that you sign up for, like pickleball or bowling, where you get to play with the team, but you have team fees as well. And then you might have to pay for the equipment and all those other things as well. Or maybe you're like me and you are somebody who has a high cost athletic pursuit that you like to entertain, like horseback riding. I certainly hope to be horseback riding as long as I'm alive, but it is a very expensive sport. So I'm going to have to allot a little more for this category for myself. This also includes the sports that you enjoy watching. So if you plan on going to all of those Avalanche and Rocky games, you're going to want to allot a little more in this category, especially if you plan on getting season passes or box seats or planning on paying for the whole family to go. If you're just going to enjoy the sports from your TV, you might not be spending that much money in this section. And then the last thing I want you to think about in this category is all of your hobbies. So everything else that you might do for fun, and how expensive are they? Are they not that expensive? Like just enjoying the nature that's out here, beautiful Colorado, going outside, seeing what's out there, looking at the flowers, maybe reading. Books cost some, but there are plenty of ways to bring that cost down by getting a Kindle or an iPad and reading online. Or researching family history. All of those are things that you can do relatively for free and enjoy all of those hobbies without incurring much cost. Or are your hobbies a little more costly? Maybe you like refurbishing furniture and buying those pieces and spending a lot on paint and maybe reselling them to get some of the cost back, or just enjoying doing that. Maybe you like gardening, which costs some, but then you also get to reap the benefits of the flowers and the fruits that you get to produce, or collecting antiques or other valuables. Depending on what your hobby is, it might cost a certain amount. Maybe in your later years, you want to pursue some further education. There are obviously different programs that help bring the cost of education down later in life, but there still might be costs for classes, etc. So think, what do you like to do for fun? Where do you plan on traveling? And how much are these things going to cost? How often are you going to do them? Remember, the national average for this category is 8%. So make sure you have 8% down on that national average category, and then look to think, okay, how much are you going to be spending here? Is it toward the higher end at that 15, toward the lower end of that 5? Take your guess for yourself. I'll give you a few seconds before we will talk about how you share with your family and friends all of the fun things that you're doing in our communications section.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sarah. So like she mentioned, we're moving on to communications. This one's an interesting one. It's kind of tricky, and you may not have thought too much about it when you're thinking about your retirement budget planning, but it definitely is a big part of our lives today, and probably will continue to be when we move into retirement. We've seen a lot of changes and advances in technology, how much it costs, how we use it, I think just within the past 5 years. So kind of tricky to guess what it might look like later down the road, but using things that we have now, like cable, landlines, smartphones, we can make our best guesses and how much we want to have saved for this category into retirement. So communications on average is about 5% of total expenditures. If you're more in the lower end, could be about 2%, or higher, maybe you're more towards that 8%. So when we're looking at communications, some things we can ask ourselves are, what type of cell phones and cell phone plans do we want to use? Are you the type of person that wants to upgrade every single chance you get, have the latest and greatest technology, so eventually we could have holograms to talk to our family members and loved ones? And another thing to consider could be that internet connection. Are you living somewhere remote where you have to pay a little bit more to get faster internet to have that communication? Or are you someone who's okay having a very basic package? Looking at kind of cable, another way we could look at that is streaming services now are super popular. So how many do you want to have? How much do you need to be entertained? Are you going to have the full package, Disney Plus, Netflix, Hulu? Maybe you do have that cable, be the cool grandparents, so when the grandkids come over, they have the best time with you. Or are you going to have different ways to entertain those family members and yourself later on? Maybe you only need 1 or 2 streaming services. Looking at other devices that we have too, again, iPads, tablets, computers, laptops, those are all becoming a lot more popular in homes. So just think about how many you would like to have and how often you'd like to maintain and upgrade those. So again, we're looking at about 2% to 8%, somewhere in between. 5% is the average there. Some other things we can consider too, looking, like Sarah mentioned, our travel plans. Are you going to need to have an international phone plan? Maybe you want to go away to Europe for 3 months and family members want to talk to you somehow. And just think about your current technology use and if you think it will be a big part of your life as you're moving into retirement, or if it is a big part if you're already there. Give you a couple seconds there, and we'll pass it off to Mike to finish us off with our last category.
Thank you, Emma. All right, so I do want to dive into kind of the last but definitely not least category of gifts and donations. know what Sarah spoke to earlier. This is one of those nice categories where you have a ton of control over it. National average there that you're going to see is about 5%. But this category has a huge range, and that's because the things inside of it can have a huge range. First piece of that is going to be the gifts. And so are you in the situation where you don't have a ton of extended family, you've only got a couple kids, maybe 1 or 2 grandkids, or do you have 5 kids who each had 4 kids, and every Christmas the home gets a little bit hectic, you're kind of swimming through the crowds? What's that situation look like for you? The other part of that, though, is the gifts. Are you the grandparent, and there is no knock here, are you that grandparent that wants to send the awesome card every year with the $2 bill in it? Because if anyone tells you that's lame, they're lame. I still have those $2 bills and I treasure them. They're awesome. I'm just going to put it out there. So what does that look like? So are you in that camp, or are you like my mother-in-law, who has to have the biggest gifts and the most gifts every single holiday to make sure that, the transportation costs that Bree talked about are already going up just to be able to fit everything in the vehicle when you're trying to drive home? What does that gift and what does that season look like for you? That's going to push you anywhere in this range, right? The low end being 2% of below average, or the high of being 15%. Gifts are going to be a big part of that. The other area, though, that you need to think about is donations. And this can be, again, a pretty big range when you're really thinking about what that means to you. Is there a certain cause that you have really kind of put that blood, sweat, and tears into throughout your life, something that you really believe in a group that you've loved to put your time into? And as you get older, maybe you want to shift that more to a monetary contribution, or maybe you still want to put in a ton of time with them, and that's kind of what you want to do in your retirement. That's great. So how much of that are you going to be budgeting, though? How many different organizations are you trying to help or work with, as well as your faith? Is there a commitment that you've made there, and some money that you are budgeting out each and every, maybe even week, to make sure you're contributing there? So this is really that range that you're going to fall into. Again, 5 being the average, but are you going to be in the high end with the big families and loving to work with different charities and organizations, or on more of the low end? Well, maybe it's a small family, only get together a couple times a year, keep things pretty modest, and just kind of live simply and enjoy that time that you've earned throughout all of your career and throughout your life. So again, take a moment there, think about that. Are you in that average area of 5%? Are you as low as 2%? Are you all the way up there at that 15% range? Once you've got that number and you've kind of thought through it to yourself, pass it back over to Katie to kind of bring us home. And what do all these numbers mean?
Awesome. Thank you so much, everybody, for going through those categories for us. Let's see, Ruth, sorry, Miss National Average for clothing, food. So the national averages for clothing, food, and housing. Let's see. Go through those real quick.
So I got it here, Katie. So for food and clothing, the national average is 18%.
Awesome. Food, 18% for food and clothing, and 32% for housing. Cool. Awesome. Thank y'all so much for going through those different categories for us. And before we jump into the calculation, just want to kind of reinforce the idea that, all of this isn't completely set in stone. This isn't an exact measurement. And if retirement is maybe a little bit further away for you, then this can be a really great starting point to start considering all these things. And then over the years, as life happens and things change, then perhaps you can go back and reevaluate kind of what you're thinking. Now, if retirement is a little bit closer, perhaps you're already in your retirement years, then this can be a really helpful guideline to use as you're going through your budget and making those decisions on how you want your funds allocated. But let's get into that calculation now. So The far right column is where you were recording your calculations. And so you will add up those 8 numbers. So we had the 7 main categories. The 8th one was that other category. So add up those 8 numbers. You will then multiply that by 60 and then divide by 100. So I'll give y'all a moment to pull out your calculators and figure out that calculation. That final number, it is a percentage. So I'll show you an example here in just a second. I'll leave that calculation up on the screen for another second. So you add up your 8 categories, multiply that number by 60, and then divide by 100. All right, so let's see an example of what this looks like. So for this person, they keyed in their numbers, got their national averages there, keyed in their calculations for what they thought each of those categories would look like for them in their situation. Got 110%. As I said earlier, your number did not have to equal 100. So they did 110% multiplied by 60 divided by 100, and that gave them a final number of 66%. What this is telling them is that based on their ideas of what they want their retirement years to look like, they would need to replace 66% of their pre-retirement income. So most of us aren't going to spend the same amount of money in our retirement years as we did in our pre-retirement years. So this is giving us an idea of how much we want to be replacing so that we can spend those retirement years living out that vision that we pictured for ourselves. Now, the experts are saying that we should be trying to replace about 70 to 80% of our pre-retirement earnings so that we have those funds to live out our retirement years. And yeah, as I mentioned kind of at the beginning of classes, all of our situations are going to look a little bit different. You know, the things that we're envisioning, the things that we want to do, the goals that we have, everyone's going to be a little bit different, and everyone's story is going to look a little different. So as much as I love to over prepare for things, that 70 to 80% for me personally feels kind of overwhelming. So if you are in the same boat as me and that kind of seems like a lot, then take a deep breath. It's going to be okay, because the reality is that people aren't actually spending that much money. So reality is that the average retired person is actually only spending 60% of their pre-retirement income. So that number looks a little bit better, right? It's a little bit easier to digest. And so just kind of think about that when you see that national average column, and then what your calculation came up to. Where do you land in that range? There's going to be extremes on either side. There's going to be folks that are spending a lot more money and folks that are spending a lot less money. But that average person is actually only needing to replace 60% of their pre-retirement income to enjoy those retirement years in the way that they envisioned it. Now, in a perfect world, we've all been saving for retirement, since we were babies, right? But unfortunately, that's not actually the reality. A lot of us not only aren't really thinking about retirement, but also aren't saving for retirement yet. As you can see, we did some research, and the younger we are, the fewer of us are actually saving for those retirement years. And if you find yourself in the situation, closer to that retirement age, and you haven't been able to start saving, things come up. I have some folks that are very important to me in my life, and they're right around that 70 years old, and they don't have a clue what their plan is and don't have that savings set aside. And so if you find yourself in that situation, where you're either at retirement or approaching that retirement age, and you've had some difficulties with saving enough money over the years, just remember those resources. Like Nate and Bree mentioned earlier in class, that 211 through United Way. It's a really great resource. Those options that are out there to help. And you can use this worksheet to look at your budget and figure out how you want to allocate your funds, especially if you're on a fixed income. A lot of us are going to be on a fixed income in our retirement years. So staying on top of that budget and knowing where we want our funds going, how we want everything allocated, that's going to help out a lot. And if we are having trouble covering everything that we need to cover, know that help is out there. There's lots of great assistance programs, and there's nothing wrong with reaching out for help. That is why these programs exist, is so that they can provide resources. And that, there's a lot of categories that take a big chunks. That housing category, that's a really big chunk of our budget. So get assistance, take advantage of those programs where you can, and then you can look at reallocating the funds in your budget to cover some of those other areas. Now, we do always recommend that the earlier you start saving, the better. And a big reason for that is because of our friend, compounding interest. So we have an example here of 3 different people who put $10,000 in their 401k and did nothing to it until it was time to withdraw at the age of 65. So we have somebody at age 25, 35, and 45 that did this. And at age 65, when it's time to withdraw, you can see how big of a difference that compounding interest makes. The longer those funds have to sit there and build on top of each other. Now, this is not to say that at any point it's too late to start saving. It's never too late to start saving, but the sooner that you are able to, the better of a position that you'll be able to find yourself in. All right, so we have some different options that we want to go through in terms of where to put that savings when you're setting money aside for your retirement years. So first, we're going to touch on the IRAs. So there is the traditional IRA and a Roth IRA. So let's go through some of those differences. So with a traditional IRA, you can make pre-tax contributions, and then those contributions grow tax deferred. So what does that mean? That means that in the year that you make the contribution, you get tax benefits that year. But when it's time to withdraw those funds down the road, you will have to pay taxes on it. With a traditional IRA, there's no age restrictions on making contributions, but there are requirements when it comes to withdrawing. So at age 72, you have to start making mandatory distributions. With your Roth IRA, the contributions are made with after-tax contributions, and then those contributions grow tax-free. What this means is that you don't get any kind of tax benefit in the year that you make your contribution, but as long as you're withdrawing after the age of 59 and a half, those withdrawals are tax-free. So you've already paid, the taxes on the front end. So the government's already got their money, so they don't really care at what point you start withdrawing. There's no requirements on making withdrawals like at a certain age, like there is with the traditional IRA. Just like traditional IRA with the Roth, there's no age restrictions on making those contributions, and as I said, there's no mandatory distributions. Now, traditional IRAs and Roth IRAs are really great tools to use to do some savings on your own. Know that the maximum contribution limit for traditional and Roth IRAs is $6,000 per year. Now, once you're over the age of 50, they do allow some catch-up contributions. So over the age of 50, the maximum contribution limit is $7,000. That's per year. So now those are IRAs. So now let's look at 401ks. So 401ks, this is going to be through your employer. And with 401ks, the contributions are tax deferred. A lot of times employers will match your contributions, which is awesome and definitely something to take advantage of. And some employers will even contribute to your 401k, whether you are contributing to it yourself or not. With 401ks, those funds are often deposited in various investments, and that's going to depend on your risk tolerance. So for my 401k, I'm able to log in on the website and kind of rate what my risk tolerance looks like, and that's going to change where those funds are being invested. With 401ks, you can take loans out. Just be mindful of any kind of taxes or penalties and fees that are associated with that. And if you do work for a smaller company, another version of this is going to be the simple IRA, and that is for companies that have fewer than 100 employees. So that might be an option that you see being offered. But when you're trying to decide which route you want to go as far as what you want to use to save for your retirement years, it can be really helpful to chat with a financial advisor, and they can look at your specific situation and see which option might be the best for you and help you get to where you want to be and achieve those goals that you have for your retirement years. So with that, though, I would love to open it up for any questions. I see the chat's been active, but if anyone has any questions, feel free to unmute, throw in the chats, and I'll stop sharing my screen. I appreciate everything.
That's great. We really appreciate all of this. Is there a way that you can review the last 3 slides, the 3 before you talk about the IRAs, how you computed everything again? Could you go through those again? So you add them up, you get your percentage, you times it times 60 and divide by 100. Where are those calculations coming from?
So where we got the calculation?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
Yeah, so this is a tool that we've been using in my mind has gone completely blank. Bree, if you can remind me the resource that we're using for this.
Yes, so the National Credit Union Foundation are the ones that put together this simulation. And where they come up with that math, Pamela, is how Katie was explaining how the average expert usually recommends that you need 70 to 80%. What the US Bureau of Labor and Statistics says is that you need 60%. So the way that comes in the equation is based on what they say, you need about 60%. So you've put in each of your categories and decided what that looks like. So the dividing by 60 is what actually gets the percentage of your pre-retirement income that you'll need based on the lifestyle you're imagining in your percentages.
So whatever percentage you end up with is the amount of your pre-retirement income that you should be living on.
That's correct. So Katie, do you mind actually pulling up the share screen on the example once you've done the equation? Because I know that this actually gets folks caught up quite often. So we'll go back to that slide just so you can see that once more and kind of explain that a little bit further. But this one is actually, so this individual, see, they've got their national averages there, then their calculations. They were a little higher in food and clothing, about the same in some of the categories, but a little higher in each one. So in their particular circumstance, they came up with 110%. Once they put that into the equation, they come up with 66%. So based on their desired lifestyle in retirement, they'll need 66% of their pre-retirement income.
Okay, not how much they should be saving to be able to live that way when they retire.
Right. Just because this is a simulation that's offered across audiences, we don't like to speak in direct numbers because that's
Okay.
case by case basis. Based on how
Sure.
you live your life today and how you anticipate it's going to be lived in retirement, those dollars can typically be figured in this person's circumstance. They would need to think about what they bring in monthly. I'm going to need 66% of that each month to
Cool.
really achieve my
Okay.
lifestyle. Now, if that sounds crazy, or maybe savings just has not been there for you now, it's really just a matter of looking at each of these categories and saying, oh, I was a little higher in each one of these. How can I cut back? Or just to bring it full circle back to what we were talking about, where can I potentially use an assistance program to maybe assist in narrowing some of these dollar figures so that I can put more towards other areas and get a little help with some.
Great. Great. Thank you, Bree. That really helps.
Absolutely.
Do we have any other questions in the chat or anybody, if you would like to unmute yourself, you're welcome to throw out any questions at this time.
I saw the question from Mark about increasing CD rates. That's a fun question. I wish I knew the answer, Mark. I would definitely like to know that one. They, as Nate said in the chat, they're subject to change. So we update our rate sheets the second business day of the week. Usually it falls on a Tuesday, but that could vary just depending on holidays. But yeah, you could always look at ent.com or go into the service center to see those.
Ari, what are you doing? Did you get your homework done?
Oh, whoops.
Okay, I'll get it for you.
You want to, there you go.
Happened to all of us at least once throughout these
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Yeah. So folks, you'll be getting a survey. It won't be going out tonight, but it'll be coming out tomorrow. And we really would like you to give us your feedback on that, how you liked this module. If there was something in this particular module that you would like to see added, if there was something that didn't make sense, whatever, we would like that feedback to continue to plan as we go forward. If we want to continue and add to it or whatever. So this is kind of a debut for this module, and we really appreciate your feedback on it. And like they said, like Ent said, you have a reward. You get entered into a drawing, and that will be forthcoming as soon as we get the surveys out and we get your results. So
want to do
any
just
other
a quick plug, Pamela, if you don't
Yes,
mind, just
please.
for our education center. It's so important to Ent to offer this financial education, but also just to offer it up for free to really all of the folks throughout Colorado and even beyond if they wish. But if you go to our website on ent.com, right across the top bars, one of the top feature there is financial education. We do have an entire section dedicated to retirement and investments, as well as other categories in there. I would urge everyone just to take a look. There's videos, a lot of articles, completely free. You don't have to do anything to access those. So if you're looking for a little bit more information, certainly continue to join us on these seminars that we partner with the Area Agency on Aging. But there's also some resources there as well, just to dig into further on IRAs and just some other categories there as far as this relates.
You know, I wanted to thank you, Bree. Just as a quick add-on, you talked about different assistance programs and mentioned 211. I also want to mention, which I didn't mention earlier, that the Senior Information Assistance Center that the Area Agency on Aging operates, and we have done so for years, publishes a yellow book. It's a Senior Information and Assistance Resource Guide. It is online, open to the public, and we have a new one coming out for 2022 very soon. And that will be probably actually this week that it'll be coming out, and it will be distributed at the major libraries, and you can pick them up there. You can come by our office and pick them up, but that has assistance programs in it as well as 211, which is an excellent site as well. So we appreciate you knowing that and taking advantage of these resources, because quite frankly, there's a stark reality that hits when you leave your employment and you start looking at retirement. So this was very helpful, I think, just in looking at what you need to be able to prepare for. Excellent. Okay, well, unless there are any other comments, you've got a lot of kudos here, folks. The Ent team was awesome, spectacular as always. So we will call it for now, and we hope you all can join us next Monday for our next in a series, and we'll be about halfway through then next week. So I hope you all had a good evening, and we'll look forward to seeing you soon next week. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.